Hi everyone, my name is Kartik and my channel is about mental models. In this video I will be talking about the optimism and pessimism biases. This is the 7th video in my cognitive bias mini-series. Sometimes we're over-optimistic about something good happening to us. This is optimism bias. Similarly, we sometimes overestimate the chances of something bad happening to us, and this is pessimism bias. Now, this might just sound like either being optimistic about something or pessimistic about something. So where is the bias in this? Well, the bias is essentially the unrealistic belief that you have of either success or failure in comparison to others. Now, this can happen in any given situation at any time, but our emotions can contribute to this, i.e. we're more likely to suffer from optimism bias if we are in a good mood. Good mood equals optimism bias, and similarly if we are in a bad mood, then we are more likely to suffer from pessimism bias. Let's just write that better. Okay. Now, while being optimistic or pessimistic isn't necessarily a bad thing, under or overestimating events has its side effects and can lead to poor decision making. So that leads to poor decisions. Now let's look at an example of optimism bias, OB for short. A few weeks ago, the UK's Supreme Court ruled on the Rwanda policy for asylum seekers. So, Supreme Court ruling. The previous Home Secretary believed that the Rwanda government, so I'm going to put R in a circle, Rwanda government could be relied upon to comply with the arrangement. And that there were no substantial grounds for believing that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda would be at risk of something called refoulement. The Supreme Court stated that, number one, Rwanda has a poor human rights record. Number two, there are systemic defects in Rwanda's procedures and institutions for processing asylum claims. Number 3. The UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, has given over 100 examples of the practice of refoulement in Rwanda, which continued, so sort of a sub-point, continued after the agreement with the UK, after the agreement was concluded with the UK. Number 4, Rwanda failed to fulfill its obligations given to Israel under a similar agreement in place between 2013 and 2018. And again, this was a similar agreement where there was a specific undertaking to comply with the principle of non-refoulement. Here, asylum seekers were secretively moved. So asylum seekers were secretively moved to a neighbouring country from Rwanda, from which they were sent back to their country of origin. Number 5. In 2021, the UK government criticised Rwanda, or the Rwandan government, in 2021, of enforced disappearances, torture and deaths in custody. And finally, the agreement between the UK and Rwanda was a memorandum of understanding, which is not legally binding, and therefore asylum seekers can't rely on the MOU. So even though the Court of Appeal had previously stated all of this with evidence, there was an unrealistic belief that the Supreme Court appeal would be successful, and so the government challenged the Court of Appeal verdict. So this is the sort of the fact that Rwanda could be relied upon. That was an unrealistic belief, and therefore optimism bias. Now, the Rwandan government may have entered into the agreement in good faith, where the capacity to produce accurate and fair decisions on asylum claims could be built up. However, at this point in time, it was not shown to be in place. So this is a real-life example of optimism bias. I think there are other biases at play with this as well, but this is a good example of optimism bias. Let's now look at a smaller example or two of pessimism bias. So we have a routine annual medical checkup with our doctor, and we've had these annual checkups routinely in the past, so this isn't anything new. However, on the way to the appointment, all we are expecting as the outcome of this checkup is to be diagnosed with a terminal illness, and this is an example of pessimism bias. Another example, let's say a wife goes out to do some shopping, and it's at the local supermarket where she always goes, and there's lots to buy, so it will take a little bit of time. Now, after she goes, the husband, who is at home, realizes that one item has been missed off the shopping list, and so the husband calls the wife to let her know about this one item. Now, when she doesn't answer her phone, the husband worries that something terrible must have happened. And again, this here is the example of pessimism bias. So, how do we overcome these biases, optimism and pessimism bias? Well, I have to create two lists. So, overcome. So I have to create two lists, one for optimism bias and one for pessimism bias, because they're slightly different. So for optimism bias, how do we overcome this? First of all, we need to remember negative outcomes that have happened. So negative experiences, if we remember them, are likely to minimize optimism bias within us. Number two, we need to stand back and look at the event holistically, and if possible from a third person view, and that will help to minimize the risk of thinking about the event with optimism bias. Number three, taking that a little bit further, speak to someone. And the whole idea of speaking to someone is to gain their perspective, because not everything can be seen through your own eyes, and you might be missing something, or you might be over optimistic about something which someone else could very easily and very properly guide you on. Number four, do some contingency planning. So by forcing yourself to put in place a plan for when things go wrong, i.e. a contingency plan, you are balancing your thoughts. You're not only thinking about the fantastic sort of outcome that is unrealistic, but you're also thinking about all the things that could go wrong, and so you're balancing your thoughts. And the other thing is, by putting a contingency plan in place, you're actually thinking about actions to take if something were to go wrong. So it's a positive double whammy. You're balancing your thoughts, but also you've got real actions, tangible actions to take if the worst were to happen. And so these are the four things to do in order to overcome optimism bias. So what about pessimism bias? So first thing for pessimism bias is positive affirmations. So write down a few positive statements and read them out aloud and repeat this often. And by doing that, you will break the cycle of being overly pessimistic and start to feel a bit more optimistic. Number two, practice mindfulness. And so the idea is not to label any situation as good or bad, but it's more about being in the present, in the moment, with a neutral frame of mind. And so if you're not thinking pessimistically, then that's a step in the right direction. Number 3, keep a log. And this is a log of all the good things that have happened in the past. Pessimism bias is about holding on to bad experiences, and so reminding yourselves through this log of all the good things that have happened to us in the past helps us to let these bad thoughts or these sort of negative experiences which we are holding on to go. We let them go, and that's what this helps to do. Number 4, reframe your thoughts. This is a little bit harder than the others, but you need to reposition how you think. So as an example, rather than saying I won't enjoy something, you should try saying I may or may not enjoy something, but I won't know unless I try. And so by repositioning that, we're not sort of saying to change it from I won't enjoy something to I will enjoy something, but to make that smaller change of let's see how it goes, and not just thinking the worst or that it will be a bad outcome. And finally, taking this a little bit further as well, is hoping for the best. So this is similar to the one above of reframing your thoughts, but actually being conscious about being pessimistic and then hoping for a more positive outcome, saying that, oh, this will go well, although a little bit harder than reframing your thoughts. By being conscious about being pessimistic and hoping for a more positive outcome is a step in the right direction. And so these are the 5 things that you can use, 5 techniques that you can use to overcome pessimism bias. And that is optimism bias and pessimism bias in a nutshell. And that is all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.